Hey everyone, and welcome to another presentation. I'm Dr. Gale and I'm glad you're here with us today. So what we're going to talk about today is looking at one of those things that we inevitably will have to do, or at least more than likely have to do. It's one of those things that gets our pulse racing, the sweat pouring out, just makes us uncomfortable and nervous. What are we talking about here? Having to give a presentation. So whether or not you're having to do it for a class in school, or whether or not you're having to do it as a sales pitch in a company or something you're working with, whether or not you're growing in your career and now you're having to go to conferences and present, what we're going to talk to you about is the keys to success on how to be able to not build the presentation, but what we want to look at is how to actually go about giving the presentation itself. So as we go through today and start looking at things, again, there's a ton of stuff out there on how to build a presentation, how to make the better PowerPoint, how to build in interactions or the other tools to use, that kind of stuff. There's tons of stuff out there on that. But what there's not a lot out there is on how to actually prep yourself to give the presentation once you have all the stuff built. You have your aids ready to go and you're ready to use them. But you still have to be able to get up there and get that confidence to start with those aids. And actually a lot of times we get in trouble with the actual presentation aids because we're not prepared to do the presentation, we're nervous, all that kind of stuff. So what we want to talk about today is we're going to look at the keys to success, what we need to do beforehand, before we even get into the presentation to make sure that we're ready to go and that it will lead us to success in the presentation. Then we're going to talk about those ways to be able to build our confidence up, and you may never get rid of the nervousness level, but there are still ways that we can at least mentally go about it to be able to prep ourselves to give the presentation a little bit better than just walking in cold off the street and trying to give it. And again, I know some people are okay with that, they're used to that, they've done it enough that they can just wing it out like that. But we're going to go ahead and say, no, we need to build that confidence level up so that we can get those presentations started right. And then lastly, we're going to take a little bit of a look at the differences between giving a digital presentation, where you're going to be talking into a camera or a computer or something, maybe even a screencast, versus going and having to do it live. So we want to look at all those aspects. So to start, let's go ahead and talk about some of the keys to success. Now obviously getting started with this before the presentation actually happens is where we're going to end up being able to start our success level. So first off, we're going to need to build out our presentation, make sure we fit into the guidelines of whatever it is that we're going to be presenting. If they say you have 15 minutes, build it down to 15 minutes. If they say that, if you put in that you're talking about this topic, make sure you stay on topic. All that kind of stuff are the baselines. Now, how do we know that we're going to be able to stay in the 15 minutes? How do we know we're going to be able to cover the material that fast? Well, one thing is obviously the clear answer is you've got to practice your presentation. So yeah, I know, and that's going to be a theme that always goes throughout this, always practice everything. But if you don't practice the presentation, you don't practice it in a scenario where you imagine that you're actually in front of the audience presenting it, running through it like you would, you're not going to know if you actually fit in the time frame. You might have material that you have to cut. You might say, I only have 3 slides, but you filled out those 3 slides with so much to talk about, you'll never fit in the time frame. By practicing your presentation, again, in the method that you're actually going to develop it. So if you're up there talking in front of people, you get up in the middle of your living room and you start acting like you're talking it. You run through the PowerPoints. You play whatever interaction you want so that you know you're practicing it in the same scenario that you will when you give it live. That will show you whether or not you're fitting in the guidelines, and again, it helps you start getting familiar enough with the stuff that you feel like you can talk it. It becomes rote in your head instead of you having to actually take time to think about it. So again, practicing your presentation is obviously going to be key at the beginning. Then, as you're building the presentation, don't forget about the importance of bullet lists. Now, we're not talking about putting in massive amounts of paragraphs in your slides. Everything that talks to you about building presentation aids will tell you don't do that. But you need to have enough bullets in there throughout that it triggers something in your mind that it's what I'm going to talk about. So you're not reading from the slide, and that's where we get in trouble when we put paragraphs in there. But you need that bullet just to trigger it. So, okay, what was I about to talk? Oh, there, okay, that's what I'm going to talk about, boom, and you start laying it out there. So go ahead and get used to making good bullet lists that have keywords that trigger, again, in your mind what you want to talk about. Now, outside of that, don't forget about the importance of presentation aids too. They're there to help you. Yeah, it helps guide the audience to what you're talking about too, but they can also be there to help you. So don't forget to do things like put in little breathers in there. So you can do things like put a big image in there that talks about it, has some words on it. It's like a comic that they read or something, or put in a little video or something that you can link out to. Make sure that they have internet access to run it. But put little things in there where not only does it give the audience a little bit of a laugh and a little bit of a break, but it gets you a break to be able to regroup so you can start putting your mind into the next section you need to talk about. Also, don't forget that you can put in slides that prompt you to do something. So you might put in a slide or something that says something like, here's the instructions of what we're about to do. And yeah, that's great, the audience, but you're going to tell them that anyways. You're going to walk them through the instructions. What that serves for you is more of a, oh yeah, I forgot I had an interaction I wanted to talk about. Oh yeah, I forgot I was going to take them to this video. It serves as that key prompt for you to do some kind of interaction that you built in there. So feel free to put a slide in there. You make it look like it's part of the presentation, but it's not part of the presentation. It's just for you to know what you're going to be talking about in the next segment. And then lastly is make sure you use stories, even if you have a presentation that's all facts and figures and that kind of thing. People relate better to stories. So this is where it's, I always tell people, hey, you need to read a lot. I know even if you don't like reading, find something interesting to read. Go watch some TV, go watch some movies, listen to some. All of these things build in experiences that you're seeing or you're reading or you're hearing about, that you can turn those into stories later and put them in your presentations. Who knows when, again, Harry Potter pops into a random story about history or religion or something, or when you can take some kind of Marvel superhero thing and dump it into an education class. Any of those type of things are stories that will relate better to people. And so if you can fill stories in strategically throughout your presentation, not only are they easy to tell because usually it's a personal experience, so you can't really mess it up, but it also, again, re-engages the audience. It gives them something to kind of take a break away from, oh man, that's a lot of numbers, a lot of facts that I've got to remember. So strategically place stories in there as one of those breaks to help you kind of manage the progression of your presentations. So those, again, are just some of the things we can set up beforehand, building out the presentation aids and stuff to set us up for success. Let's talk about now our confidence level. You will inevitably go into this thing nervous. Even when you step up there the first time and you look out and you've got an audience in front of you, it could be 10 people, it could be 100 people, it doesn't matter. It could be into the camera and you just thinking that there's going to be 100 people out there. It's going to make you nervous, and that's okay, that's natural. So how do we combat some of that so that we feel confident? So once we say that first word, we know we're in a roll that starts progressing good. Well, the first thing, again, is practice. Practice it, practice it, practice it. The more it's on your mind, the more it's in there, the more it comes out of natural rote memory rather than you having to go in there and try and really think through it. This is why we tell people don't memorize speeches. If you memorize a speech, inevitably you'll hit a place where you end up forgetting what you were going to say, and it messes your entire presentation up. You don't know how to jump away from that. But if you've practiced it enough and you have those bullet lists with keywords in there and you've got little breaks to regroup yourself, you can usually use that to kind of work your way through whatever it was you're going to talk about, regroup, and then move forward. So again, practicing these things is going to be key. Now, another thing to remember when you're going into this is you are the expert. So they want to come and listen to you. It's not like you have to convince them of something you're saying is awesome. If you're at a conference or something, they've come to your session over other sessions because they want to hear you. If you are a student giving a presentation, the teacher wants to hear you to grade you. So, I mean, again, you are the expert. Also, you have more than likely, since you put up this presentation, you've done the research and stuff behind it to know it. If you're giving a presentation at a conference, you've done enough in your career where you know how to talk about this thing because you have done it so much, you are so good at it. So you can go in there with that kind of confidence and talk about it. It's not when they start asking questions, they're trying to trip you up. They really want to know what the information is. If you're a student giving a presentation, it's the same thing. Now, you may think, I had to write about Roman architecture and do a research paper on it, but I only looked that up for a week and a half. I'm not an expert. Well, yeah, you're not an expert compared to a PhD, but you're an expert compared to every other student that didn't do that type of research paper because they picked a different topic. You may even be an expert at that in that moment compared to, the teacher that's going to be grading you because they may have never studied it. Now, if they did their PhD on it, they may know some things are in there, but they also know that you didn't do a PhD. So again, you are an expert at that point talking about it. Now, that doesn't mean ethically that you just throw random things in there and, hope that nobody catches you on it. You do the work behind it, but it also means if you get a little slip up here or there or something, you usually can keep moving forward, address it later on with an email sending out, a redaction, something like that. But you can usually kind of get through those things. They're not going to know. Again, they're listening to you as the expert. Now, as an expert, the other thing you need to do is avoid perfection. You are going to slip up in these. Again, don't memorize your speech because you're going to end up accidentally saying something that's not in the memorization and then it throws everything off. You're going to end up stumbling somewhere in the middle of your presentation. You're going to get tongue-tied, all this kind of stuff. It happens and it's okay. Just take a breath, pause, and move on. The trick on that is to remember everybody else has done it. Everybody else has stumbled on that. I've stumbled in this video already. It happens. It's okay. Recollect your thoughts, move forward. And again, as long as you haven't memorized it, you practiced it, you're going to know what that next bullet prompts you to say. You just move forward and you keep going. It's okay. And honestly, when those things happen, poke fun at yourself a little bit. Talk about the tongue-tied. What can I say? I get it. When the projector's not working at the beginning, you're getting flustered and stressed because your 5 minutes are over start time of the presentation. Make some jokes about it. How every time I touch technology it breaks, or you know what, it's finally come back to me because I worked the help desk and now I can't fit. Whatever. Just come up with something, poke fun at yourself, because again, all of us have been there and we can accept and respect that, hey, it's happening to somebody else. Don't worry, we're there for you, okay? So don't stress on that stuff. Poke fun at yourself a little bit and it really re-engages the audience. So it's okay to mess up. Truly, it is okay. Everybody's good with it. So with that being said, again, hopefully that will help you build your confidence. You know you can make mistakes because we all do it. You know you're going to practice it, so when you make a mistake, you can move forward. And you know you are the expert, so if something accidentally comes out wrong, you can end up kind of addressing that on the end, but nobody's going to really call you out on it in that moment. So with that being said, let's go ahead and take a look real quick at what happens if I'm doing a digital presentation rather than a live face-to-face presentation. So really, truly, a lot of it is not different when you're going to be doing a digital presentation versus a live presentation. You're going to end up following the same rules. Your presentation aids are going to be built the same. Your practice is going to be the same. It's just the difference is you might practice in front of a computer screen rather than walking in your living room. But your mannerisms, you're still the expert. You're still going to mess up and you just keep going with it. All that really is the same if you're presenting digitally, recording yourself on a camera versus doing it live in front of a group. Now, something to keep in mind as you're doing the recordings is do your camera placement strategically. So obviously you want to be looking at the camera, you want to fix your background. I've got my background here where I put the little thing so it looks nice and clean. All my mess is up here where you guys can't see on the edges. So make sure you do that camera placement. There's another thing on the camera placement. If you need notes and you need those bullet points, which most of us do, you want to stick the camera somewhere right above where those notes are or right below where those notes are. Even if it's just opening up a laptop and sticking it under the camera. Even if it's right now, honestly, I have some paper that is taped underneath the camera so that I've got my bullet points there. So whatever you do, you want to do it where you're still looking into the camera so that they feel you're connecting with them over the digital medium, but you can quickly do a glance down like I just did, back up, and then start talking. All right, you can use your notes, but then you're still looking at the camera. So remember that with camera placement. Also remember your motions and your twitches. If you end up having to cut and splice things later on and you've been on a live camera, you can get away with some of that, but you're not going to be able to get away with a lot of it because, you know, I can have my hands here, then I try to cut it and all of a sudden my hands are here or here or here. That's going to be an awkward look when you do things like that. Now, a way to be able to cover that up is think about some things in post-production. You might want to do something where you do a scene switch or something. So a few minutes ago when we did a scene switch and I started talking about this, I'd actually reached forward to the camera and pulled down my sheet of notes. You guys wouldn't see that movement though because I'm going to have a scene switch where a title slide comes up and covers me up and says something while I'm talking. So again, it hides it. Maybe I would have an image talking about something where I ended up, you know, moving awkwardly, but I had the verbals going, and it said something about, man, when you're climbing up a mountain and blah blah blah. Now I may have messed that up, and I may have spliced my audio together so it didn't sound like I messed it up. But I'm probably going to put a picture of a mountain over it instead of me so that you don't see the awkward movement. So just be aware, you're going to have some awkward motions and twitches and stuff. As you get more experience at it, you can kind of write your kind of like thought processes down where you can cover that up with, again, images, videos, anything like that. Lastly, let's talk about screencasting. So the tips above where we're talking about camera placement and motion twitching, that is when I'm actually talking on the camera. So you got to get it a little bit more right because you can fix some things in post-production, but you can't do a hog wild, all out, completely redo in post-production. Okay, so you've got to actually be able to record this thing live without too many screw-ups in the middle. A screencast though, I'm recording the screen and my audio. So you're not actually seeing me, there's no live movement in there. So if that's the case, now you can do a little bit more on fixing things, especially if you're doing something like a PowerPoint, you're just doing a recording over it because the PowerPoints usually can be static images. So there's a couple of things to know though when you're doing a screencast, recording your screen where you have audio over it. One thing is if you're trying to navigate on something like websites, if you're trying to show how to use a software, anything like that, I would recommend starting out doing an audio track and then doing your recording and your movements. It is very hard to try and talk while moving at the same time. It's just something that the brain just functions differently. Now, as you get practice at it and you do multiple of them, it becomes more natural and it's a little bit easier. But if you're just starting out, I would almost record the audio separate, take it into your post-production thing like, Adobe Premiere or Camtasia or something like that. Lay your audio track, and then as you're playing your audio track, you go back in and do the screen capture of you actually clicking. That way it syncs up a little bit easier and better. So separating those two out will make your life a little bit easier. Another thing is, as you're moving things around, move your mouse quick to wherever you're trying to talk, and then hands off the mouse. And the main reason is, again, if you're trying to splice stuff around later, just like when you're talking into the camera, if you make a movement and then you have to splice it so you come back in your hands here, it looks awkward. Same thing with the mouse. If the mouse is all of a sudden jumping because you had to cut little video clips out where you missed, it messes up. If you can move the mouse, keep it there static, talk, when you mess up, you can go in and splice it and the mouse hasn't moved. So again, hands off the mouse, try to get there as fast as you can, hands off while you're doing other stuff. Lastly, if you screw up on a screencast, like you have the little word slip up, or you start talking about the wrong thing, or you tell a story that just went on a tangent and you want to pull it back and it's just not going to work out, make sure you leave yourself a couple of seconds in between the error and starting your new thing. What you want is a gap of space of silence, and that way as you're going in and you're trying to splice out the audio and everything, you can easily tell where the mess ups are, because you're going to have a bunch of spikes on the audio, then a straight line where you messed up and you stayed quiet, and then where you went and started doing it over. Okay, and that tells you right there is where I've got an error and you can go clean up. It makes the post-production process a lot easier, a lot quicker. And lastly, also on post-production, rely on any kind of special effects, any pointing out, any zooming, anything like that on your post-production software. Don't try and do all that stuff live. Don't try and, oh, let me zoom in on this page so you can... No, use the post-production software to zoom in. Don't try and draw things on the screen live while you're doing your thing. Use the call-out features in the post-production software to do your circles and your highlights and your arrows and all that kind of stuff. Again, you're already talking. Chances are you're already trying to move your mouse, click on things, typing. All of a sudden now you want to start trying to draw and stuff. It's too much. You're going to end up messing up and getting frustrated with it. So use your post-production stuff to try and do a lot of that editing, pointing things out, stuff like that. Ideally, if you're going to try and do your audio and your screen capture at the same time, you're just doing those two things. You'll verbally say something so it gives you a key. So when I say something like, if you look up here, I can do a zoom post-production to show where the up here is. So again, it takes one more thing off of your brain when you're trying to actually sit here and get this thing done live and recorded. So this thing's gone on long enough. Hopefully that gives you guys some good tips and some good kind of like workarounds on giving the presentations, and talk a little bit about how to do it digitally. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and cut this thing short. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We're always trying to make new videos to help you guys get stronger in your design and your development of materials for your students. If you want to, go ahead and hit the subscribe button on this. That way, as we get new materials out there, it will populate to you a little bit faster, and maybe it's something you can use. Again, what we're trying to shoot for is to give your students and you the best experience possible as they progress throughout their academic careers. So with that being said, again, reach out to us if you have any questions. Really appreciate you being here with us today, and I hope you guys have a good one. See you next time.